Hey friends, hey everybody. I welcome you to the December live podcast. I'm so excited that you guys are here. This is the last podcast that's going to be airing in 2022. So after this, it'll be a happy new year. This will be podcast episode 191. Freaking 191 podcasts I've done. That means I've done a couple more than one a week, but roughly January 1st is the third birthday party for the podcast You Were Not Broken. And here's a shout out and a thanks to everybody who has been with me from the beginning. And it's not a lot of you, because did you know in the first 6 months of the podcast 3 years ago, it took 6 months to reach 2,500 total listens. And now I get that in like 36 hours. So to all you baby podcasters out there, you just got to keep going. You got to let people find you. Do a consistent product. Talk about stuff that's meaningful to you, and other people will find it meaningful too. I guarantee it. So welcome to the December podcast, and thank you for finding me. Even if you are not an OG, I super appreciate that you're here. And if you want to give me a little holiday gift or a New Year's gift or a happy third podcast anniversary gift, wherever you're listening to podcasts, do a like and a follow and a review, because that tells the algorithm that this is important and worth following, and then other people can follow me. So that would be an amazing gift if you would give that to me today. So I am just dialing in here, and I have so much to talk about. The first hot topic on the agenda is that snakes have clitorises. I don't know who was asleep under a rock this week, but this was late-breaking clitorati news that snakes have clitorises. Why are we shocked? But it made a whole bunch of headlines, and people weren't looking for snake clitorises. They just thought maybe female snakes wanted to mate with the male snakes, but turns out them feeling good and being motivated to have sex helps, which is what the role of the clitoris is, pleasure. Making sex pleasurable makes you want to do it more. Late breaking news. You've heard it here first. So female researchers found the clitorises because nobody was looking for them prior. Snakes had penises. We'd already identified those, but we hadn't really looked at the clitoris. We being researchers, until you put female researchers in there, you guys, representation matters. We need female scientists. They think differently. They come to things from different ideas, and they're like, why are we neglecting female genitalia? So Dr. Fowle is a snake researcher, and she dissected the genitalia of 9 different species, including the common death adder, that represent 4 main snake families, and they all had clitorises. If we ignore it, it doesn't exist. This is what worries me. I can't say body parts on Instagram. I get blocked. If you can't say body parts, they don't exist. This is why it's important, you guys, because these things exist in 50% of bodies. So research like this shows that female animals likely have a much more active part in mating than they are given credit for. Really? Like it's so like embarrassingly obvious. Like we just realized there's clitorises, like, and all animals have clitorises from what we can tell. Dolphins have clitorises. They have what they call functional clitorises, and they use their clitorises too. So dolphins do. That was the other part of the research. The other late breaking news, and I can't remember how many people I talked to this about, but the good plastic surgeon, Dr. Blair Peters, out of OHSU, and his urologist friend, who is based in California. I'm going to pull up her name right now. Please hold while I find this amazing urologist. I'm going to get her on my podcast, but she is studying for her boards and is very busy. So I can't get her until after the urology boards are done. For anybody who cares, that's in February. So we're going to get her on, because she was the one who actually talked to Dr. Blair Peters and was like, you know that we don't have a human study looking at how many nerve endings are in the female clitoris? And he's like, I'm going to have her tell the story, but from what I know, this is the story. And he's like, what? And he's like, well, I have access to clitorises because he does gender affirming care. And so they did a study. They presented it at, I believe it was a sexual medicine conference in Florida that just happened. And turns out that the human female clitoris has right around 10,000 nerve endings. And before, we had always said, we being like the people who talk about clitorises, has always said the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings. And that's actually a bovine cow study. And I know you've heard me talk about that. So Dr. Maria Oloko is the urologist who's female who told her plastic surgery friend that we don't have a human study, who then did the human study, and they presented this work together down in Florida studying the human clitoris. So more studies needed, but we now don't have to quote a bovine study, which is pretty awesome. So I start this podcast with two clitoris discussions, snake and human. I'm going to go through, it's just so many amazing papers today because I'm bringing you all the research. This paper needs to be talked about, 2022, Journal of National Cancer Institute. This was a retrospective study looking at Danish women, observational cohort. So these are looking back at what happened, looking at women who have breast cancer who then use hormones. And this is very important. It says, in postmenopausal women treated for early stage estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, neither vaginal estrogen therapy or menopausal hormone therapy, which means systemic, was associated with increased risk of recurrence or mortality. More studies needed, you guys. This doesn't mean that everybody who has estrogen sensitive breast cancer can just go on menopause hormone therapies. But what they're showing is in the women that did, they looked at them and they said, your cancer recurrence and your mortality were not worse. Now, you would think that would be the breaking news of this article, but it wasn't. The breaking news of this article is that in a small set of women who are on aromatase inhibitors, they had an increased risk of recurrence, but not mortality for vaginal estrogen therapy. So now we have a whole bunch of people saying people who are on aromatase inhibitors can't be on vaginal estrogen therapy. I'm like, well, okay, but then at the same time, you have to say that people can be on, we can't make these big claims because we might as well just make the claim that everybody can be on hormone therapy then after breast cancer. And that's not what this study is saying. It says we need to look into this more. It's quite interesting. Now, is this just a very small population size? So we didn't have a big enough size to say, yeah, the vaginal estrogen therapy didn't really matter. And women who have bad enough breast cancer to be on aromatase inhibitors have a higher chance of recurrence anyways. The vaginal estrogen didn't matter. We don't know. We need a randomized controlled trial, but more research is done for both of these. I think these are both provocative results, meaning let's not make any sweeping generalizations, but people who went on systemic hormone therapy after low-risk estrogen-positive breast cancer had no increased recurrence or mortality. At the same time, women who had that, who are on aromatase inhibitors on vaginal therapy, did have an increased risk of recurrence, but not mortality. So what to believe, what to do. But, some people are taking this basically, and they're like, nobody should be on vaginal estrogen therapy if you're on aromatase inhibitors. And we're like, well, no. That's not what this is saying. But let's realize there might be something to that population that we need to study more. Because safety first, quality of life also, both important. So I wanted to bring that up to hopefully that clarified it and didn't muddy the water. But of course, I'm going to get a million more questions, which I'm glad I do. Like every week I get estrogen positive breast cancer people reaching out and saying, I need help. Why is nobody studying this? They are. And as they publish them and I get hold of them, I'm going to bring them to you. So the next paper I wanted to present to you was coming out to 2022, reassuring data regarding the use of hormone therapy at menopause and risk of breast cancer. So this is basically looking at all of the studies that we've had done. And what we do know is estrogen therapy, systemic, significantly reduced the risk of invasive breast cancer. And the Women's Health Initiative study showed that estrogen therapy reduces breast cancer incidence and breast cancer mortality. Now, please refer to all the previous podcasts on hormones to get the nuance of the Women's Health Initiative. But it's basically, I'm doing my job to undo the fear that women have. I had this patient this week, and she comes in, and I was just going to give her vaginal estrogen therapy. We weren't talking about systemic. And she's like, well, yeah, but it causes cancer. And I'm like, step back a second. Do you actually think that doctors are trying to give you stuff that is known to cause cancer? And not talk to you about that? So do you think it's weird that a doctor wants to give you something and you think it causes cancer, but the doctor's fine with it? Like, or maybe do you not know everything about this thing causing cancer, which it doesn't, especially vaginal estrogen, you guys, has not ever been linked to that, except for this previous provocative study about the aromatase inhibitors. We're complicated. Humans are complicated. So again, this paper showed that we have decreased risk of breast cancer. And even if we take micronized progesterone, not the synthetic progesterone, with our systemic hormone therapy, it does not increase your risk of breast cancer. So we do our best to tell people the truth, and studies are going to keep coming out. Estrogen alone in women with prior hysterectomy was not associated with the risk of breast cancer in women in either race. This was a study looking at Black and white women. So it's good. We do need diversity in our studies. And so we do have some studies looking at least at Caucasian and African American breast cancer risks. So this is the other important thing to know, you guys, because I get this question all the time. The Women's Health Initiative estrogen progesterone trial, a randomized control study, found that among women with an elevated baseline risk of breast cancer based on family history, the impact of estrogen progesterone therapy on the risk of breast cancer was similar to women without a high-risk family history. So many people come to me and they're like, my mom had breast cancer, my sister had breast cancer, my cousin had breast cancer, my mailman has breast cancer. And as far as you taking hormones and that changing your risk, it doesn't do it. Just you having a first-degree relative might increase your risk. But you taking the hormones or you not being able to take the hormones because of your family history is irrelevant. What about BRCA? People ask me about BRCA all the time. There's a meta-analysis of 3 studies, including 1,100 BRCA-A gene-positive women with intact breasts who had undergone risk-reducing bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy and either received or did not receive hormone therapy. Use of hormone therapy was not associated with breast cancer risk for BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation carriers who received hormone therapy after risk-reducing salpingo-oophorectomy. There was a reduced risk of breast cancer that did not achieve statistical significance for mutation carriers who used estrogen therapy compared with those who received estrogen progesterone therapy. So not statistically significant, but again, more studies needed on that. So these studies provide reassurance that among women with deleterious BRCA-A mutations with intact breasts who have undergone risk-reducing gynecologic surgery, menopause hormone therapy, at least over the short term, does not increase breast cancer risk. So more and more reassurance, as much as we can. And then the final thing on this study, it says the meta-analysis make a strong case that when prescribed to women after hysterectomy, menopausal estrogen therapy, whether conjugated estrogen or micronized estradiol, does not elevate the risk of invasive breast cancer. So people are still going to come talk to me and think I'm trying to give them something that causes cancer. It's insane. But like, these myths will not die. Therefore, my podcast. All right, one more thing I want to talk to you about menopause, and then we're going to shift back to sex. Is people are often confused about when they can start menopause hormone therapy and what the guidelines say. What the guidelines say is that within 10 years of menopause onset, hard to know exactly for everybody because we get hysterectomies and have ablations and have IUDs and things like that. Average age of menopause, 51. So within 10 years of that age 51 window, or when you know you actually went through menopause and stopped having periods, you want to start the earlier the better, meaning the earlier you start it, the more beneficial effects you see from it. The later you start it, and this is where all the baby boomers are missing out because they grew up in the era of doctors being scared we were killing people, and now we're realizing we're not, we're actually decreasing morbidity. But let's say it's been 15 years past, right? There's something called the timing hypothesis or the healthy cell hypothesis. And basically what this means is your heart and your blood vessels, your arteries, everything is at its healthiest to receive and keep taking and get on estrogen early in menopause. You've already undergone intimal cardiac vascular thickness and changes and calcifications. And then if you throw estrogen on that later on, you're going to increase your risk of clot and stroke. So Natural menopause is considered premature if it occurs before 40 years of age, early if it occurs between 40 and 45. Approximately 10% of women experience menopause before 45 years of age. With the mean life expectancy at birth of 81 years for a U.S. woman, many women will spend up to 40% of their lives as postmenopausal. So basically what this says is starting, and we know for those early premature menopause people that their life is extended by being on hormones. And I see these people. I see these people all the time. Oh, I went into menopause at 36. My doctors didn't have me on any hormones. We know they have a much increased risk of heart disease and osteoporosis and early mortality. All right, let's talk about what else. This paper, again, is the scientific statement from the American Heart Association, Menopause Transition and Cardiovascular Disease Risk, Implications for Timing of Early Prevention. This is in the Circulation Journal in 2020. Depressive symptoms during the menopause transition have been strongly linked to increased cardiovascular risk. Vasomotor symptoms reported at midlife have been linked to an adverse lipid profile, insulin resistance, and a greater risk for incident hypertension. Women with early onset menopause, again less than 45 years of age, had a significantly higher risk of overall and fatal coronary heart disease, even after adjustment for established cardiac vascular risk factors. So, you know that 13.5% of women are smokers? Seems high. It's really bad for your heart. Number one killer of people in America, heart disease. Number one killer of people with breast cancer, heart disease. Number one killer of people with prostate cancer, heart disease. We don't care. People don't care about heart disease, man. Like, we don't care about it. It's absolutely insane. Numerous observational studies before 1991 reflect the clinical practice of initiation of menopause hormone therapy near the time of menopause. These studies reported reduced rates of coronary heart disease in menopause hormone users. 1991 analysis of prospective observational studies reported an overall summary relative risk of coronary heart disease events of 0.5. That 0.5 relative risk means it decreased risk by 50%. Analysis from the Nurses' Health Study in women 30 to 55 years of age at baseline showed a lower risk of mortality among current users compared with those who never used menopause hormone therapy, with mortality reduction greater in women who have a higher risk. This is important stuff. Women initiating menopause hormone therapy greater than 60 years of age or greater than 10 years since menopause hormone therapy had no effect on coronary heart disease or all-cause mortality. Of note, risk for stroke and venous thromboembolism were increased. And these are in some studies that they cite. So this is why when people say, am I too old? Is it too late for menopause hormones? This is what we're talking about. Systemic, not vaginal. You can be 104 years old and start vaginal estrogen because the vaginal estrogen is not systemic. So I'm hoping this helps it up. In a U.S. matched cohort study of health insurance claims between 1999 and 2011, transdermal estrogen preparations were associated with a lower incidence of coronary vascular disease complications compared with oral estrogen preparations. This is why I try to get people off oral estrogen, get you on a patch or a ring. You can even do transdermal cream if you want. It can be a little more expensive. But that oral probably has a higher coagulation, clotting factor because it goes through first pass metabolism. In both the Women's Health Initiative and the HERS study, conjugated estrogen and the progesterone, so the combo estrogen-progesterone, was associated with a reduced incidence of type 2 diabetes, as was conjugated estrogen alone in the WHI study. The evidence supports cardiovascular benefits for menopause hormone therapy initiated early among women with premature or surgical menopause and within 10 years of menopause in women with natural menopause. The benefits of menopause hormone therapy, including lower rates of diabetes, reduced insulin resistance, and protection from bone loss, appear to outweigh risks for the majority of early menopause women. Perimenopausal women should be provided individualized guidance, especially when vasomotor symptoms are present. And then it says, although evidence-based data supporting a statistically significant reduction of coronary vascular disease events and all-cause mortality in primary prevention in women are lacking for statins and other lipid-lowering therapies, the current guidelines for the prevention of coronary vascular disease do not provide specific recommendations for women and men independently. I don't know if people know that. The statin data is really based upon studying men. Women do not seem to have the same gains for primary prevention. But I don't know. I don't see many women on statins where I work. But for primary prevention, statins don't seem to be effective in females. Yet we don't study them, and then we treat them the same as we treat men. So more risk and reward research is needed. What else can I say this? Again, showing the importance of early hormones. There's observational cohort studies demonstrated an increased risk of all types of stroke in women who underwent bilateral oophorectomy before age 50 compared with women who retained their ovaries. So if you're having surgery and you don't have a reason to take out your ovaries, this is a pop quiz. I just learned this a couple years ago. Taking out your fallopian tubes reduces your risk of ovarian cancer, not taking out your ovaries. You can keep your ovaries unless your gynecologist has a good reason to pull them out. Earlier age at natural menopause is generally reported as a marker of greater cardiovascular risk. Summary and conclusions. Hysterectomy does not influence cardiovascular risk factors before or after menopause, but taking out your ovaries can. Vasomotor symptoms are associated with worse cardiovascular disease risk factors. We don't know why yet. They're still researching this. And subclinical atherosclerosis. Sleep disturbance, a common complaint during the menopause transition, is linked to a greater risk of subclinical coronary vascular disease and worse cardiovascular health indices as in midlife women. Depression occurs more frequently during the perimenopause and postmenopausal years and is related to both vasomotor symptoms and incident coronary vascular disease. Central visceral fat increases and lean muscle mass decreases are more pronounced during menopause transition. The increased central adiposity is associated with an increased risk of mortality, even among those with normal BMI. Central fat is bad, you guys. It's inflammatory. It's got inflammatory cytokines. The cytokine storm you heard about that kills you when you have really bad COVID. That central fat can create a bunch of cytokines. It's inflammatory. Speaking of us needing to have better muscles and exercise, limited data exists on the current status of ideal cardiovascular health components in women during menopause transition. According to this limited literature, only 7.2% of women traversing menopause report a physical activity level that matches the current recommendations, and less than 20% consistently maintain a healthy diet. You guys, 2023 is coming. Let's get on the healthy heart. Again, nobody cares about heart disease. It's the number one killer. We're freaked out about breast cancer. Breast cancer, we can cure breast cancer like never before. I'm not saying don't be freaked out about it. I'm just saying as far as shit that's going to kill you, even if you have breast cancer, it's likely you're going to die of heart disease. We need to take care of our bodies. Exercise, exercise, exercise. I'm reading this amazing book about muscles and exercise right now. It's called Deep Fitness. A patient gave it to me. Shout out to my patients who give me books because it's like my love language. And it's going into like all the reasons that muscles are so good for us. Muscles are an endocrine organ. Muscles literally signal our heart and our lungs to stay healthier. So like working your muscles works and improves your cardiovascular system. It's insane. All right, the literature supporting a critical role for the time of initiation of menopause hormone therapy use relative to menopause, with initiation at less than 60 years of age or within 10 years of menopause, appears to be associated with reduced cardiovascular risk. We clearly need more research, but if you're going to be on this, get on it early because it's better for your heart. After a point, it doesn't really matter. Your heart disease is already kind of locked and loaded. And again, who cares about heart disease? Everybody should. It's the number one killer. I learned about that with prostate cancer in residency, and it blew my mind. I'm like, the number one killer of people who've been diagnosed with prostate cancer is heart disease. It's the same thing as the people who aren't diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I never want anybody to say, like, I'm blowing off cancer. Like, cancer is very stressful when and if it happens to me and my family. Like, it's stress. I want to acknowledge that. but only 20% of us have healthy diets and only 7% of us exercise enough. Like, we're not doing enough to be as healthy as we can to decrease all of these things. So I'm going to have Dr. Jamie Seaman on in January. So if you're in the membership, you can be on there live and ask her questions. She's Dr. Fit and Fabulous. She's all about muscles. She wrote an amazing book called Hard to Kill, which I love. But like, women need muscles. Men need muscles. Everybody needs muscles. The next article I want to talk to you about is, well, before we get to that, The Economist this week in their magazine said that the FDA in 2023 is considering making oral birth control over the counter. So that's going to be amazing. I hadn't heard about that. I haven't heard about it in any other news. So stay tuned for oral birth control coming over the counter in 2023. At least the FDA is trying. It's very hard to get things to be over the counter. I wish vaginal estrogen was over the counter. It's not. It is in Britain. And I think Finland and Israel, please somebody correct me. But so vaginal estrogen is over the counter in multiple countries. It's not in America. I haven't heard it coming over the counter in America. But a girl can dream. I'm not going to go out of business. Like, people are still going to come and see me if I don't have vaginal estrogen to give to them. I'm not worried. But the access issues would be so awesome. And it's so safe. It could be over the counter. Okay, moving on to the Economist International section, December 3rd Economist issue. They talked about sexual health, which is so awesome. Lots of people suffer from sexual problems. The taboos around discussing them are weakening. I love it. So I think I want to read you the leader. They actually did 2 articles. I want to read you the leader about this. A generation ago, being depressed or anxious, let alone having serious mental health problems, meant suffering mostly in silence. Stigma meant few people wanted to talk. Doctors turned a blind eye. Most saw mental illness as regrettable, but not something that made much of a difference to a patient's physical health. These days, the stigma has faded, if not entirely disappeared. Early treatment often nips things in the bud. A similar transition is due for sexual problems, which lie beneath the same blanket of taboo and embarrassment as mental health once did. 1 in 5 men in America and Europe have erectile dysfunction at some point in their life. Half of British women say they had a sexual problem in the past year, including pain during sex or difficulty reaching an orgasm. Plain old lack of desire is common, especially among women. Trivialities, a topic left best unmentioned. Sexual problems can be harbingers of other illnesses, such as diabetes. Erectile dysfunction is up there with smoking and a family history of heart disease as a predictor of heart trouble. Doctors who ask about it can make an early diagnosis and offer preventative coronary treatment. Sexual problems are more generally thought to contribute to between 1/5 and 1/2 of all divorces. Now, you guys, I have not, Casperson aside, I have not seen that statistic. I've been Google searching that since I began this podcast of like the amount of divorces and breakups that happen because of money and sex problems. I hear those are the top 2, but I do not see studies on it. And The Economist is not the sort of news magazine that cites their sources, unlike academics. So, but when I saw that, I'm like, well, they got that from somewhere. So I'll repeat that. Sexual problems more generally are thought to contribute to between 1/5 and 1/2 of all divorces. Not that like this is well recorded. Like, not like you go to court to file your divorce and they're like, reason for divorce, sex or lack thereof. Impotent penis. Probably not on the legal documents. So like, how do we know besides just asking people? Erectile problems are both a cause and consequence of anxiety, which make life harder to cope with. Poor productivity at work is twice as high among men with such problems as among those without them. Fascinating. Tackling sexual dysfunction can be simple and cheap. One easy win would be to change the way children learn about sex. Oh my God, this is what I've been talking about. Instead of focusing only on avoiding the downsides, such as diseases or unwanted pregnancies, teachers could encourage discussions of pleasure and how to talk to a partner about it, as well as how to communicate and understand enthusiastic consent. All right, Casperson aside. So, yes, you guys, like all of us Gen X people and boomers and all of us adults, like we think, oh, the youth, they're so sexually enlightened now, and you know, they have it so much better than we did. And the studies do not support that. Like, one study shows that sex ed in this country now is worse than it was in the 90s. And I just saw this person in my office, early 20s, and I asked her what her birth control plan was, and she said hope. And I said, well, hope is actually the plan if you want to get pregnant. And she's like, well, sometimes we use the withdrawal method. And I'm like, also a plan for getting pregnant, especially if you use it sometimes. And I'm like, you literally can't get pregnant on your own. Somebody has to deposit sperm inside your body in most cases. She's not talking to that person about the plan. And I tell you, this is my wish of being alive when we have a reversible form of male birth control so that everybody can take responsibility. And can we please have each other talk about it? That is not taught in sex ed. That is not taught how to talk about semen avoidance plans. Okay. Sexual problems often crop up in adolescence, made worse by general teenage awkwardness around the opposite sex, or indeed the same one. So teach them about those too, and never mind the giggles at the back. Critics may object that sex is everywhere in modern culture, and the last thing anyone needs is more of it. But this misses the point. The sex in film and television dramas, let alone pornography, bears scant relation to real life. Amen. This is a great Economist article. Like, it's basically just, I probably could have written this. Trying to learn about sex from Hollywood is like watching James Bond for tips on career. Watching James Bond for tips on a career as a British civil servant. Better to point teenagers to more realistic sources, such as Bish, a British website that answers all sorts of niche questions, that trouble young people as they begin stumbling their way through sexual relationships. More ambitiously, sexual problems should be a core part of medical education. Only then will doctors begin to discuss them routinely, as they do with their boils, exercise, heart disease, and other health-related matters. A lot of suffering can be alleviated by simply giving people frank information about what happens to them and why. That, plus a few sessions of therapy, some pelvic muscle exercises, or suggestions from simple changes in lifestyle, is often all patients need. Such things are now packaged in apps, some of which have been approved by medical regulations. Scientists should shed their inhibitions too. It is hard to fix problems without first understanding them. Research projects are often blocked because committee members find the subject uncomfortable, aka why we just discovered clitorises and snakes, because nobody's looking. And for the Puritans out there who doubt that mere pleasure is sufficient grounds for changing things, it is worth noting that better research into sex is likely to improve public health. Studies find that when discussion of pleasure is part of HIV prevention schemes, people use condoms more. Sex is one of the greatest joys in a human life. At its best, it is a source of ecstasy and shared expression of lasting affection. That so many people nonetheless find it painful or disappointing is a tragedy. Yet for a large proportion of them, it can be turned into something far more agreeable. Being more open about sex is one of the easiest ways to enhance happiness and health, so why not try it? Good job, Economist. What a nice leader you had. And if you want, and if you have access to The Economist, they then have another page and a half article about taboos weakening around talking about sexual health problems. I will not read that one aloud here because our time together is precious. But I just think that's a beautiful place to end the year of, like, you guys are here because you're interested in hormones and health and aging well and sexual function and how to make it better and how to communicate better and how to have better personal growth using sexuality as a focus, all the things. If you want group coaching, please come on to my membership. We have a blast in there. All the members are getting a luxurious end of year, Happy New Year, Happy Holiday of Choice thing in the mail. I haven't announced it yet. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see what it is. And if there's a couple left, we'll give them to new members that sign up. So Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Diwali, happy all the things, you guys. Happy New Year, happy life, happy love, happy sex life. I'm here for you. I cannot wait for 2023. I've got like 6 amazing interviews coming up in January with amazing humans, and it's just absolutely a privilege to drink coffee, read books, podcast, interview people, and hear from you guys. And thank you so much. Reach out to me. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you love. And Happy New Year present to me and 3rd year birthday present to this podcast. Go follow, like, review, and share. And let's make this thing go international and blow up in its 3rd year. All right, guys. I love you so much. Until next time. Until 2023, you are not broken.